You're 2 years old. You're sitting on the kitchen floor, hitting a pot with a wooden spoon as hard as you can. Someone is laughing, maybe your mom, maybe your grandfather. You don't have a word for any of this. The sound of the laugh is the best thing you've ever heard, and you are completely happy. You will never remember it. Not the pot, not the spoon, not the person laughing. The average adult's earliest real memory dates to around 3.5 years old. Everything before that is missing. Not blurry, missing. Welcome to infantile amnesia, the strangest blank spot in the human mind. The first 3 or 4 years of your own life, the most intense, plastic, transformative years your brain will ever have, are sitting inside you like an unmarked room you cannot get into. For most of the last century, the explanation was tidy. Babies don't make memories. The hippocampus, the seahorse-shaped structure deep in your brain that stitches experiences into things that happened to me, was thought to be too immature to record anything specific until around age 4. No recording, no replay. Case closed. In 2025, that explanation fell apart. A team at Yale, led by Nick Turk-Browne, pulled off something almost nobody thought was possible. They put awake infants, some only 4 months old, into an fMRI scanner and showed them new pictures. Later, they showed those pictures again, mixed with new ones. The babies stared longer at the ones they'd seen before, which is the gold standard sign that something inside them recognized the image, and the scanner showed exactly where that recognition was forming. The hippocampus, the same posterior region that lights up in your brain when you remember where you parked the car, lighting up in a 1-year-old. The signal got stronger after about 12 months, which suggests there's a real developmental ramp, but it was there, in babies, undeniably. Well below the age anyone thought possible. That changes everything. You were not failing to make memories on that kitchen floor. You were making them. And then, somewhere on the way to the person you are right now, the door to those memories slammed shut. So the real question isn't why didn't your brain record your first 3 years? The real question is, who took the recordings? Here's the leading suspect, and it's the most counterintuitive answer in modern neuroscience. Your own brain erased them on purpose to make room. In 2014, in a paper published in Science, Paul Franklin and Sheena Jocelyn at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto laid out a hypothesis they'd been building for years and tested it with a clean, almost cruel experiment. The hippocampus has one tiny region called the dentate gyrus that does something almost no other part of your adult brain does. It grows new neurons. In a baby, that region is a construction site. New neurons are being born and shoved into the existing circuits by the thousands every single day. The brain is throwing up fresh wiring at a furious, almost reckless pace. Franklin and Jocelyn's idea was that all that new wiring acts like a hand-sweeping eraser dust across a chalkboard. Each new neuron forces its way into a circuit that was holding a memory, and in shoving in, it scrambles the pattern that was there. Your 2-year-old afternoon on the kitchen floor isn't being deleted. It's being remodeled into oblivion by the very growth that's making you smarter. To test it, they took infant mice, who have their own version of infantile amnesia, and chemically slowed the rate at which new neurons were added to the hippocampus. The mice remembered. Then they took adult mice, who normally hold onto memories just fine, and cranked the neurogenesis up to baby levels. The adult mice forgot. Memory, it turns out, is partly a real estate problem. And right about now, you're probably forming the obvious objection, the one a reasonable person would raise. If the memories are being overwritten by new wiring, they should be gone, destroyed. So how would we ever know it's overwrite versus the brain just failing to encode anything solid in the first place? Franklin and Jocelyn went looking. In a 2018 follow-up with Axel Gustjolen, they trained infant mice on a task, waited until the mice forgot it, and then used optogenetics, a technique that lets you switch on specific neurons with pulses of light to fire up the exact cells that had encoded the original memory. The mice remembered. Not partially, not vaguely. The behavior came back clean. The memory was still there. The light just had to find the right door. That single result reshapes how you should think about your own childhood. Your first years aren't erased the way a deleted file is erased. They're more like a library where someone has gone in and shuffled every index card. The books are still on the shelves. You just can't ask for them by name. And that's where a second, quieter culprit walks in. A name doesn't just mean a word, it means the structure that lets you hold an event as something that happened to you. The New Zealand psychologists Gabrielle Simcock and Harlene Hayne ran a now famous study in the early 2000s where they showed toddlers a strange little contraption they called the magic shrinking machine and quizzed them about it months later. The kids could only describe the experience using the words they'd had at the time of the event. Vocabulary they learned afterward, and no matter how relevant, never made it back into the original memory. Whatever language the toddler didn't have, the memory could never grow into. Translate that out. At 2, you don't yet have a stable narrative I, a self that things happen to, with a beginning and a middle and a continuing thread. You don't have the grammar of memory yet. Even when your hippocampus is recording the spoon and the laugh and the warm tile floor, there's no internal narrator to file the recording under me, so it floats. And later, when the narrator finally shows up around age 4 and asks the archive for everything filed under me, the archive has nothing matching that name. The wiring blurred the page. The missing self meant the page was never titled. 2 different mechanisms working on the same victim. Now sit with what that actually means. The people who loved you most fiercely, most patiently, most unreasonably were doing it in the one stretch of your life you have no access to. The hands that held you when you couldn't hold your own head up. The voice that read the same book to you for the 400th time without complaint. The face that hovered over your crib at 3 in the morning when you screamed for no reason anyone could ever name. They were there. They were everything, and you owe them a debt your memory cannot even locate, let alone repay. It's worse than that. The version of you they knew, the small, wordless, absolutely present creature who laughed when a dog walked past, is also gone. You don't remember being them either. 2 people met across that crib every night for years, and only one of them ever got to keep the meeting. Whole years of love, witnessed only from one side of the room. This is the part of being human nobody warned you about. You don't begin where you remember beginning. You began years earlier, in a body and a brain that were already loving and being loved at a depth you'll spend the rest of your life trying and failing to consciously recover. Here's the strange consolation hiding inside that. Those years aren't gone. The Yale scans say your hippocampus was writing them down. The Toronto mice say the engrams are still sitting there, waiting in the dark, for a light they're never going to get. Everything poured into you in those first 3 or 4 years. Every lullaby, every smell of a kitchen, every kindness, every fear is still in there, somewhere. Not as a story you can tell, as a shape you became. It's why a certain perfume can wreck you, and you can't say why. It's why some people feel safe to you on first meeting and others don't, and you can't explain the math. It's why your nervous system has rules you never agreed to. It's why some songs feel older than they could possibly be. Your first 3 years are doing all of that, right now. From behind a door you cannot open. You are walking around being run in part by a person you do not remember being. So go back to that kitchen floor. You're 2. You've got a wooden spoon in your fist and a pot in front of you, and somebody is laughing behind you, and the whole world is exactly the right size. That afternoon happened. The Yale scans say your brain wrote it down. The Toronto mice say it is still in there, intact, waiting in the dark. You won't remember it. But you are partly made of it. The spoon, the laugh, the warm tile floor, the person behind you. That whole afternoon is in here, in the way you flinch, the way you laugh, the way you love. You don't have the memory, you have the shape the memory left behind, and maybe that was always the deal.